Well, as you stated in your article, there are activist groups out there that would very much like to see ecocide happen with, as you put it, the number of human beings on the planet exactly equaling the number of dinosaurs, which is pretty scary stuff. But while we're on the topic of dangerous words, you wrote a piece about white guilt. Now, it surprised me to find out that white guilt was first mentioned in 1947. You say that white guilt is linguistically and philosophically incoherent. But is that?
Yes. Born in America, which you can, in a sense, you can understand because they have a history of slavery we don't have. And although, as you said, first citation we've been able to track down so far is 1947, not often used until recently. Now they want to tell us that every white person, just by sheer dint of being white, is guilty of every unpleasant thing that ever happened to any person who is not white. And in fact, not being not white is enough. You've actually got to be black not to suffer from white guilt. I suspect even Asians and people who are not coloured enough could be guilty of white guilt. But it's a nonsense expression. It doesn't make sense because it's based on the idea that somehow we can be guilty individually. You and I can be guilty of things that happened 2 or 3 generations ago. So if my great-grandfather murdered someone, do I somehow inherit murder guilt? I mean, it is linguistically incoherent to say that that can happen. But I've got to say, there are people, nice white people, who want to say they feel guilty about everything that's ever happened to any black person ever. So, you know, there are white people in Australia today whose parents arrived as immigrants 20, 30 years ago, who were told they have to feel guilty about what happened in 1788 or in the 1800s. It is a nonsense expression. And the sad thing about it, it's actually being used as a reason to vote for the voice. You see, we need to be more emotional about the voice. We have to emote about it. And so if we can use the emotion of guilt, then that gives us a good reason for putting a big tick and voting yes for the voice. So the triumph of emotionalism means white guilt is a big thing in this world today. And sadly, no one is stopping to think, does it make any sense?
Well, it's a bit like they want to hang a Bunnings paint chart up, and if you're so far along the chart, well, then you have to feel guilty about basically every crime ever committed in the world, whether it was from your ancestors or not. And if you get a tan and you move down the chart, well, then you can stop feeling guilty for a couple of weeks until it wears off. But
I've got Celtic forebears. I'm never going to have a tan. I'm always going to be guilty.
That's very true. Is that one of those words, white guilt, where its new purpose has changed from what it was originally intended to be, so it has morphed over the generations to become a brand new word?
My feeling is it was always intended to be a word of an expression of condemnation, and it was always intended but its application is what has broadened. So it might well have been the case that there was a time in the late 1940s in America when it was meant to apply to people who were descendants of southern plantation owners who actually had slaves and who had considerable family wealth because there was a direct line. Now, I think even in that case, the connection is really not coherent or sensible. But what's happened is it's now been broadened to apply to everyone. I mean, you might be descended from a long line of extremely poor people who got no benefit out of slavery or the dispossession of black people from their land, but you're still supposed to feel guilty just because of your colour. So it started off, I think, with a narrower focus, and it's become broader and even less sensible.